Well, good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today. My name is Tia Taylor, and I am coming with you from Michigan Coalition for Human Rights. So excited to have this conversation around education. And this is our candid conversation. And I'm hoping that people join in on the conversation, share this link. Michigan Coalition for Human Rights promotes awareness of, commitment to, and advocacy for human rights and the environmental rights of planet Earth through education, community organization, and action. MCHR opposes forces that suppress human dignity, freedom, and justice locally and around the world. So, we are talking today about a very important topic, which is bridging the gap, advancing equality in education for every student. So, how do we do that today? What is the impact today? What changes have occurred that impact that gap today? And what are the answers and solutions that we can begin to strategize so that we have better communities? And so today we have our special guest, and our guests are part of our board members, co-chair, um, longtime servants, activists. We have Chantelle Yancy and Dr. Brenda Bryant is a part of the conversation today. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Good.
I want take a moment and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're doing in the community now and what what your role has been with MCHR.
Well, Dr. Bryant, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll start. I've been with MCHR quite a while, um, and right now I'm the president of MCHR. I I also sit on the board of Hush House, which is a community Black museum, which was quite fascinating on Wabash in Detroit, near Motown, and I enjoy working there. I've been in various roles on MCHR and recently just finished doing a seminar, I guess, on human rights over at Oakland University. I used to run the master's in social justice at Marygrove College, but as many of you probably know now, Marygrove is now transformed into a high school. Um, so we're looking forward to seeing how that is going to bring out some wonderful students because it's focused also on justice and social justice and also on the sciences.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Beautiful.
Well,
Beautiful.
good evening again. I have had the pleasure in being of service to MCHR and in service for quite a few years. I have served as a fundraising co-chair, an executive director, a board co-chair, board member, and still a proud member of the organization. Alum of Marygrove College by way of that social justice program that has empowered and instilled so much in me. I serve in the community on the Troy African American Parent Network, just bridging communities and staying connected with the 3% makeup of our Troy parents and families. And I am the current supervisor for educational equity, inclusion, and community relationships for the Troy School District. So definitely working front lines in this work. And I'm excited about the conversation today.
Amen.
Amen. Beautiful. And I know that there have been a lot of changes that have occurred this year, Chantel, since you've compared to last year. Um, and maybe you want to talk about a little bit what is one of the major impacts that changes that have occurred between last year and this year? And mind you, that we are only in 30 days of 2025.
I know, and I've been joking saying that January has been a long year because it
Mm,
feels like this month is a year.
I feel
When I think about where we were just in December, how we were moving toward all of the right things when we think about the work of equity, inclusion, diversity, belonging, access, talking the right language, shifting mindsets, doing the work, excited about it. Um, it's still there, but what's also very present is fear, and fear is showing up in a way of resistance and not in a necessarily good way. Not saying that that good resistance is not present, but fear is definitely on the table. And so, what is happening and what I am seeing happen is we are really leaning into doing it scared, meaning that there's been shifts. When I think about just the community I live and work in, we have felt the impacts of ICE. We have felt the impacts of conversations around eradicating and eliminating access to opportunities for all of our students. And so, what we are doing right now is equipping ourselves the right
Mhm.
way to make sure that we can really serve and protect the students that show up in each one of our buildings, regardless of their backgrounds, and definitely elevating all of their needs. So when I think about last year to this year, it's just the fact that we need to kind of not be distracted, but we have to redirect
Mhm.
where we're focused and what we're doing. And I am an advocate for just still do the right thing. At the end of the day, we're in
Mhm.
service of humans. We're humans in service of other humans. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Dr. Bryant,
yes. Are you want me
tell
to
us.
respond to the diversity, the DEI complexities right now?
Yes, I want you to just say a little bit. Did you say a little bit about you?
Yeah, I did say a little bit about me. I'm thinking about,
Yeah, but I want to add a little bit.
okay, go ahead.
I want to add a little bit because Dr. Bryant spearheaded the first cohort for Mary Grove College of social justice. And I'm not sure who else is listening right now, but those who have gone through that course in a master's program that really helped us to prepare us for today, for this moment. And I feel that I'm so glad she's on today because what she did years ago, and I came into the program in 2004, that was the first program, and we were fortified on all levels for this day,
mm,
for this moment, for this time, to be able to organize, to educate, and to help people to have a voice, to advocate. And so that's what we do. So, yes, now you may go on and tell us a little bit more about the diversity, but I have to give credit and accolades where they
absolutely.
are due.
Yeah, I was reflecting on what Chantelle said about, you know, the DEI issues and the attack on it by our current president. And I was reflecting also that, for example, right now, with the push on immigrants and getting them out of this country, the schools are empty. If
Mhm.
you go to Mexican Town in Detroit, not only do you see no one in the schools, the children are not coming, but you also don't see anyone in the grocery stores getting food, working in the grocery stores. And that is, to me, really far away from the idea of equity and bringing up our kids and doing it in a good way, a way that shows ethics, morality, integrity, uh,
Mhm.
kindness.
Yes.
It's all sending the wrong message as far as I'm concerned. And like you said, Chantel, that whole issue around fear.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And you know what is so mind-boggling when it comes to DEI is that DEI was really based upon evidence-based information. So when it came to DEI, evidence-based research indicated that well-implemented diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies significantly enhance companies and organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Fiscally, they outperformed. As far as innovation and problem solving, they outperformed. Employee engagement and retention, they outperformed. Access to new markets, outperformed. And strategic integration, DEI outperforms because people are open and receptive to ideas, new ways of thinking and doing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And in a sweep of a pen, all
yeah,
that has changed.
wave of a pen. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
All that
reminds
has changed.
it reminds me of, and this doesn't have really it's not an example of students, but when I was working at the college, and we were working in the area of distance learning, and my crew was working very hard, and the phones were always going because we had a ton of students. We had students in the thousands that were online. They were distant learning students. But we were always fighting with the mailroom because they were getting all our mail. They weren't getting it out as quickly as we wanted it out, and we weren't receiving mail in as quickly as we would have liked.
Yeah.
So what I did was I basically brought people together and had my crew go down into the mailroom and do that job. And the mailroom people came up to my place and they answered the phones. And by the end of the day, people were pulling out their hair on both ends. And there was a lot
I'm
more
sure.
empathy on, oh my God, how do you get a handle all this mail? How do you get it back up here in time? I mean, and they're like, how can you answer all these phones that are going on? Oh my God. So after that, everybody understood. They had a better understanding of where people were coming from, of the frustration that everybody was feeling. And it really worked like a charm. But that was bringing people together, exchanging rules. You know, people had not been in the mailroom before or had to answer, 20 calls in an hour, and get back to people. So I really think that whole exchange is an important thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree with that. I want to add something to that. It makes me think about. I read a book last year in a study. It's entitled "Belonging," um, and it's by Jeffrey Cohen. And in chapter 3, I believe it talks about. It gives you a case study of bringing people together that have varying differences, opinions, perspectives on things. But we all have a common goal. Like it was a need to seek understanding or wanting something to happen that would benefit all of us. And it's this concept of situation crafting. And so as I'm listening to you talk about the shifts in order to deepen our understanding, that is something that it presents, that when you craft situations to bring people together who have a diversity of thought, opinion, perspective, but you bring them together under the common goal of deepening understanding to reach something, whatever that long-term goal, that end goal is, that we all want. You get to see how beautiful that process can be with understanding and then appreciating one another for those differences, so that when something comes in the way of what could be a difficult situation or a conflict, we handle it differently. And when I think about the work of DEI, it's it's been villainized and weaponized so much that we miss what the benefits, the foundation, and the whole root and purpose was for it to begin with. It's in the essence of it, it's saying there's enough space for all of us.
Yeah.
Let's make room. But in order for us to make room, we need to understand, what are we trying to make room for? Like, what did we feel
Mhm.
like we didn't have a space in that room about to begin with? And that,
Mhm.
that we want people to understand while we're saying, I need to stay at this table. I want to be in this room, or at least let me put my foot in the door and hear what's
Mhm.
happening,
Mhm.
something. And so I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it made me think about that concept of situation crafting to bring people together.
Yeah. Yeah, they say it's a fantastic work strategy for people.
Yes.
Doing
Mhm.
teams is, it doesn't matter, women, men, black, blue, green, everybody wants to get that job done. It's amazing how everybody can get along and go ahead and do it and combine everybody's skills. It's quite
That's right.
something to see, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, and it
So
always blows my mind. Sorry, just sort of
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
with this DEI idea. The whole idea around affirmative action, and people being so angry with that and how it ended up. But when you think about its goals again, that all else being equal, what voice is missing from the table?
Mm-hmm.
You know
Mm-hmm.
how how does that hurt anyone, really? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not it.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And I think too, people are so willing to follow a narrative. They're so willing to follow a narrative that they hear without having research, without knowing the basis of anything. And when it comes to, they say, well, we want people to be promoted according to merit. Well, we've tried that.
Yeah.
It'd be different if we had people who had the door, they had the keys, and they could open the door for people. And if those people with the keys were unbiased, then
Mm-hmm.
okay, we can
Yes.
go according to merit. But
Mm-hmm.
when you come with your own biases and you have not healed from your own traumas and you have perspectives of people that are negative, then you're going to have disparity.
Yes.
So, what are the most significant disparities that you've observed in education, and how do they impact the student outcomes, those students' outcomes, um, that you guys have seen through the years? And anybody can join in. What is the most significant disparity that you've seen in education? Because these are the gaps. Where
Mm-hmm.
are the gaps?
Mm-hmm.
And as a community, we want to know, where are the gaps in education?
Well, my first thing that came to my mind was reading.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And when I think of that, I'm not sure we frame it the right way to our students. Reading is an act of revolution.
Mhm.
I mean, you can learn anything at all if you can read.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just opens so many doors.
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
when that is stripped from you, or that skill is stripped from you, of course it's going to affect your outcomes. It's going to affect your outcomes to understand. It's going
Mhm.
to affect your outcomes to love other people. It's going to affect your outcomes to have skills in certain areas, to have an understanding, a common language. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It also gives you so much freedom, independence, if you can read.
Mm-hmm.
And when students
Mhm.
struggle with that, I see that as just something that is a real uh, takeaway that hurts everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
I would add to that, one disparity that seems to be ever looming is access to the right resources. And
Mm,
when I say access to the right resources, it can be people. People are a resource. It can be a tangible need for the right curriculum. the funding that you need in order to get the books, to have the teachers in the space who are the experts in the field to teach the children who all have differences in the way in which they learn. And then access to those adults, getting the trainings and the continued learning. And I think also like the empowerment to feel like that they can be in service of those students. It's always interesting because when I come into the room, it's either like, oh, great, she's here, or oh, no, she's here, right? Like, because you're like, she's getting ready to fine tooth comb, she's sitting there, she's quiet and she's typing away, she's going to let us have it. But my whole purpose is to be the voice for those voices that are not in the room, not in the space, right? To make us think about that silent narrative, right? The things that are unspoken. And are we doing the right things in service of students? And so access to the right resources. And even in the 3 years I've worked in this role as a supervisor under equity and inclusion and diversity, and I've been doing the perception data. That's one of the main recommendations that comes up at the end after all of the key findings is you need to up your access to resources across your district. And I read that as, make sure that this student who learns differently is in front of the teacher or the educator who is most equipped to support that student. Make sure that this teacher has what she needs in order to feel like she's confident enough, or he's confident enough, or they're confident enough to do the work. And make sure that parents they have access to information. Keep them informed, engage them, partner with them. So when I think about that, I think access to the right resources. Access continues to be a disparity that negatively sometimes impacts our students. And when it's done the right way, you see the positive sides of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and
I like that. Go ahead, Dr. Bryant. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. We all love the topic and think it's so important. But, sort of adding on to that, it reminds me of some of the work that's been done with kids in school using participatory action research, which basically starts with the students asking the questions, not adults asking the questions.
Yes.
But what they have found is that when students don't have access to those resources, when they see the stark differences between a gym that has a floor and one that has, stuff all over it, you can't use it, or windows that have got, bars on them versus one that are beautiful and open, or resource rooms, et cetera, the kids pick up on it perfectly. They don't want us in their classrooms. They don't respect us enough to give us access or to provide access. They don't care.
Yeah.
And when you get that message, then you internalize it. Then you've got a whole nother set of issues that create challenges for everybody. Because we all need to feel, which goes back to the whole idea, Chantelle, that you were talking about in the idea of belong. We all need to feel worthy. And when you don't have equal access, and you can see that with your own eyes, that affects us.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's, we can't, when we talk about the gap in education, and we have to always look at the funding, and unless you've been somewhere else to see the difference, And so I've been in different schools and seeing some of the disparities in funding. And with that disparity, I've been in a school where during, right after COVID, many schools were given additional dollars. And the school that I was in probably had the best I was going to use an old term, psychosocial, but it was the best program, behavioral program that I had seen in a long time. And that is because they had all types of therapies present for the children. They had a psychologist, we had a counselor, we had social workers, we had speech therapists. I mean, you name it, they had it. They had behavioral technicians for in the classroom. Each classroom had a couple of behavioral technicians so that the teacher could continue talking. They had CPI training for a lot of the staff to work together so that when something happened in the classroom, they could get on the walkie. They had walkies. They had walkies for all the people part of the behavioral team. They would get a call, can you come to this room? And help would come. And if a child had to leave the classroom for whatever reason, they had 3 nicely padded rooms for children who had exasperated symptoms. And so we would walk the child two hands so the child wouldn't hurt themselves and no one else, and take them into their room. And we would be in there, with them, not leave them alone. There was a protocol. There was a protocol of safety. And the child was not kicked out. There was a no suspension, no expulsion policy.
Right.
They called it total inclusion because they said we care about our children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's different than a lot of schools.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of schools that I've seen, especially inner city schools, people get suspended regularly. Parents are reported to CPS regularly. One school that I know in particular, after 3 days absent, if a child is sick, the mother or the parent has to go out and make sure there's a doctor's note. And if there's not a doctor's note, then that mother is reported to CPS. Same school has mandatory wanding for kindergartners. You go into the classroom and it doesn't look as pretty as when I went to the other classroom.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't engaging,
right,
educationally. Like I go into a classroom looking, do I want to play? Do I want to learn? Does it make me want to explore? And we got to ask ourselves this. So what do you see as far as disparity when it comes to funding through the years? And even today. Well, today, we can talk about today too. What's happening?
It's huge. We all know in the wealthier communities, they have more resources. I mean, let's face it. You go to and nothing against that. I don't mean to take away from that. Like a country day. How are you going to fail at a country day? You didn't get your project done, then they take you over to the resource room and they'll sit down with you and help you work on your project.
Right.
It's a lot different than in one of our schools, say, in the middle of Detroit. Where they haven't paid their bill for the books, and so they don't have them all yet.
Yeah.
And again, what message are we passing to our kids? And it used to be, as I understand, because I'm Canadian, that it used to be based basically on housing and how much taxes you paid. And then they tried, and that was not so good, of course, because clearly the wealthier communities could afford more. So then they tried to change that structure a little bit. But then you have the wealthier communities being able to add millage, to their communities, add more money, bring in more resources again. And again, nothing, you don't want to punish anybody by taking those away. But I think it's important to look at the differences and then who looks smarter or who comes off better or who knows more or what have you. And just to think about funding, what's our value system in terms of where do we spend our money?
Mm-hmm.
they have brought in to communities, they have these buses that have come in and asked you, here's $1 worth of pennies. Put your pennies in these cylinders according to what you think they should be spent on. And there's the military, there's healthcare, there's education, there's hospital, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Where do people put their money? Not in the military. But that's where 70% of our budget goes. So that's why education is a minor little slice. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
funding's huge.
Yeah.
Yes, the systemness of our education department is very divided. Is very inequitable. And I think about the fact that the socioeconomic makeup of an area, a city, that's like one of it seems to be one of the first indicators of this is where we put our money. We don't put our money here because we automatically assume, and it's a dehumanizing process because we're not putting people's faces and their lived experiences up there when we're making these decisions about funding and dollars and who gets what. We're thinking about, oh, well, look, this seems to be a very well-off, wealthy neighborhood. And if you get deeper and you start to look at the racial disparities too, oh, and then also we can look at who's BIPOC in this community, who makes up, our white Americans or our white community, how all of those demographics begin to play. And it's a game of numbers, but it's not a game of humans, right? We're not thinking about the need, like where is the need? Not taken away from the fact that the need can't be in those wealthier communities or neighborhoods because we're looking at the money. We're following like this is where we want to put our dollars because these demographics look prettier to us. We are just looking at it. That's where the bias shows up too, right? Like, okay, naturally, I see this. Doesn't make me feel good. My bias is coming out, but I don't know how to check that because I haven't done that work. So no, I'm gonna put the money here, right? That's what we're gonna do. It's a numbers game and it's not a humans game. And that's a dehumanizing part of our system that speaks back to Dr. Bryant's, point of education is a thinner slice because that's not necessarily something that I want to invest in. I will when I have to, but if I have my choice, because this seems to be what makes me feel better to put my money toward, I'll put it there. And I'm not thinking about the human aspect and the fact that investing in our educational system and making it something where it's equitable, meaning everyone's getting what they need and we have the equality and then we're all getting access to these resources, right? That's preparing the next generation to take over for you.
That's right.
Think differently, to think smarter about how we allocate resources.
That's right. We're investing in the next
So
generation.
good. So good. I mean, and when you talk about the funding shortage, you're also talking about, like you said, technology and other resources, educational resources. And let's talk a little bit about, we talk about gaps, we're talking about gaps. How about teacher shortage? Is anybody experiencing teacher shortage or shortage of quality?
Well,
Tell
why
us a little
would
bit about
you
that.
be a teacher nowadays? You're slammed because, if your kids are failing, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And they want to punish the teacher. And you're the only one in the room with 20, 30, maybe 15, whatever, by yourself often in these situations. And you have to deal with umpteen different levels of knowledge and strengths, The other thing is too, is we could instead, which we don't, we tend to focus on kids' weakness. We could focus on people's strengths and build up on those as opposed to, not everybody's going to be a rocket scientist. Maybe they're brilliant at designing buildings.
So.
I
find that fascinating too, because when it comes to behavioral interventions, children, they teach us that we're supposed to focus on the strength of the child,
Yes.
And we
you know,
don't.
and to really, behavioral ABA therapies are focusing on what that child does that is great, that is good, that is and you provide prompting and rewarding towards that, not honing in on the negative behavior, because the idea through evidence based, they say that the more you positively reinforce the good behavior, then that will become more aspects of that child's character.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
However, when we reinforce through attention the negative characteristics, then we'll get more of that. We don't want more of that. So what are we focusing on?
Mhm.
Surprisingly, we get all this education in school about this. We get all this education in the trainings, but when it comes to the educational program itself, implementing it on that level is not always so.
No.
Very
It's
true.
not always so. So go ahead, Chantelle, about the the different shortages. I know you get to see a lot there in schools.
Yeah. I wanted to add to the asset based focus. That's what we're talking about, the asset of these students, right? Highlighting
Mhm.
that. Um, and I've been I am like a bookworm. My head isn't always in a book. And Dr. Ghodie Muhammad, I want to share this as a recommendation for anyone who might be watching this, thinking about how can we tap into those assets.
Mm.
It's called Unearthing Joy. She has Cultivating Genius too. That's the first one, but Unearthing Joy talks about really focusing in on those assets to bring the joy out in learning, teaching and learning, right? We get to be
Mhm.
joyful. What makes us joyful in the work that we do? And how do we bring that joy out and that genius out in each one of the students? Because everyone, they all have a genius, right? They all are genius in their own right.
Absolutely.
And when we do it that way, we are leaning into the assets. It teaches us and forces us to always say, okay, let's talk about this student's genius, right? This is what they're doing. And it empowers them and it empowers us too. So I wanted to add that to the conversation. And then when we think about the areas of are we jumping to technology now? Is that where we are? I'm trying to make sure I'm not jumping ahead.
You can
Doing
jump
great.
wherever you
We're
want. I
fine.
was just talking about the shortage, the teacher
The
shortage,
teacher shortage, yes.
the
So
quality shortage. Yeah.
when I think about the teacher shortage, yes, it's an underappreciated field, right? I
Yes.
mean, I will give my
Underappreciated.
children's teachers anything they want under the sun for what they provide for my kids who learn differently. They are both at, different levels in how and what education looks like for them. But they don't have any lack in their experiences and what that looks like, and them being their best selves, right? And thriving to their best capabilities in their environment. But it's an underappreciated field because
Yeah.
they are there. They need more money. We need to pay our teachers more. I'm
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
right? They need more money. They should be at six figures easily. And it's this thing of lowballing them when they are lowballing them in their funding and what you're offering them, but wanting this high quality
Right.
resource and
Right.
turnover and um pour out in what they're providing, right? So we're asking them to be high performing but underpaid, underappreciated, and just kind of always go with the flow, right? We're doing all these wonderful things. When we think about the work of equity, we're saying, hey, yes, I know we used to do it this way, but now we're going to tap into giving each student what they need. That means in your classroom, you might have to teach 5 different ways. So we're
Right.
asking them to do this thing, and we're saying, listen, it's possible, but not giving them exactly what they need. And that's why we see the teacher shortage, right?
Yep.
Because they're like, I'm exhausted and I want to give
Mhm.
you these things, but I want to be met with what I need and what I deserve at the same time.
Yeah.
Very,
And
very good
what's the
point.
mandate now that the child has to be at grade level reading by? Is it still third grade?
third grade is always, it's been like in that mandate, right? And so we are going back to what Dr. Bryant mentioned about reading and literacy, right? It's like this, that's a disparity, and we want to tap into the resources and the needs, but we need the most qualified people in the room to do that,
Yeah.
who don't feel like they're spent because they're trying to teach multiple subjects because we don't have enough we don't have enough teachers in order to do these tasks and these jobs.
Well, do you remember during the days of COVID when kids had to stay at home?
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget. I saw this celebrity. I don't know which one it was, but he was like, "Oh my God, teachers should be paid $7 million a year."
Yes,
because I can't believe all the hassle I got. All my kids are at home. Oh my God, how do they do it?
Yes.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
nothing like
how soon we forget
into other positions and jobs to let you know how hard things are out there. I mean, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They should be getting top dollars. Instead, we've got people in, that are they're selling bonds and stocks, and they're getting the top money, and our teachers are struggling like police and, firemen, and it goes on and on and on. Anyway, that's.
Yeah, and you know what is so phenomenal, because right when they opened the schools up again, because it's not like the pandemic had left, we were still in it, and they opened the schools back up, and so they did, and that's how I got at this other school, was because I implemented an emotional awareness program and developed it and implemented it for pre-K and kindergarten students who were not used to being in school. And so by the time they got to school, and because their siblings weren't in school, nobody was in school, they were wondering, why are these children behaving? They had not been taught to communicate effectively, a lot of them. And so, I mean, we had children that were beating up teachers, and they were 4 years old or 5 years old, and because they could not say what it is they wanted, they were not used to being in school, and so I developed a program so they could begin to at least identify how you feel. A lot of these children couldn't say how they felt.
Right.
And then some of them were coming out of conditions that were, they were in despair. And so, it's so important that we begin to take the necessary steps to bridge the gap, So what steps can be taken to provide equal opportunities for students with disabilities or in mainstream educational systems? Because we really need to have the conversation in the community.
Yeah.
What can we do now to help bridge the gap?
I think one thing we need to do, and we need to do it better, because we throw the term around, but it doesn't really show up in an authentic way, and that's family and community engagement. So we need to have our families, communities really be partners in this, and not try to throw, well, we're going to teach them how we want them to show up as partners, and then we'll ask them, once we feel like, and then if we don't like what we hear, then we'll just back away from that.
Right.
And the piece that you were talking about like the whole child, right? It makes me think about social and emotional needs of serving the whole child. What are they bringing with them when they come into that building or that classroom that we don't see or we don't know about? And how can we partner with whoever is at home, whoever serves as their parent, their guardian, their go-to person, to make sure that we are meeting that need, in order to help them be their best selves, right? And get what they need in an educational setting. It can't be just an either or, it needs to be a yes and. And so I feel firmly that the way we do community, and I have learned this from my transition just from MCHR into K-12 education. I mean, it shook me with just policies and practices and being above the line, very process oriented. And I'm so relational, and let's talk about it and let's have those difficult conversations. And so I'm like, whoa, I'm like, make space for how you're feeling. We can be vulnerable. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I just want to do this, and this. But then we're in disservice. That's a disservice to ourselves and to the students. And so I feel like one step we can take is really to do family and community engagement the right way, to bring in and just honestly start having more conversations like this.
Yeah.
We're crafting a situation. It's as simple as a conversation to say, I want to learn how to be a better administrator or teacher or staff member for your child. And then center the human aspect, right? So I'm a mom too, and an administrator. And I also have to walk into the space. I don't check one at the door. I bring both of them into the space.
Of course.
I have to. So I am just human, just like you. And when I walk out of here, if I showed up just as a mom, I will want these things to be centered in the space. So I think that is a big piece. Really partnering with our families and community around what needs to happen, and not just making the decisions or thinking that we know it all, because the answer is not always in the room per se. The room is the entire system.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, and when I think of, in the day that what the Black community did in terms of educating our communities about history, that was often outside the, in quote, regular school days.
Yep.
My mother, she speaks Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, English. Why? Because they had Ukrainian schools on Saturdays where they learned their culture, where the families came together, where they fed each other, but they learned. It was all a learning community. It's very interesting when you talk about, we hear the word engaging the community. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
Simply bring them in and have some pizza or something. I mean, it's simple. Yeah. It's not that hard.
It's not.
It really isn't. Everybody loves food. Feed them after but yeah, I mean, and those are simple kinds of things, I think.
Yeah.
That we can add to.
Yeah. And so, I was looking at, one of the questions I had with, I know when I was in the school system, and I worked with the MTSS and all the ELA. I hope I said that right. The testing and everything. And what I noticed where I was, you had benchmarks where you needed to engage the community at the school. There were benchmarks that were established that by this time you engage and you would have talked to children who were at a disparity, or children who not just socioeconomically but educationally needed assistance, that were like at a different tier than the general population. So when we would put on different events to educate the community and provide resources. And so I'm wondering, with the new administration, and according to the Project 2025, I'm not sure, but when you take away the funding for the Department of Education, people, I don't think they realize the different effects that will happen within the schools for people who are in that vulnerable population. What kind of services were we getting?
Yeah. Well, disabilities it's an all-inclusive, I think, too. Sometimes we just jump to one way of thinking, like what we happen to know, but it shows up in a multitude of ways. And so, yes, funding is extremely important. It's a foundation for our educational institution, right? That and the human component that goes along with it. You want to make sure that you can you can support all the things with the funding, but you need those humans in the space too. And so taking away funding will not only, okay, let's just say if the thought was, well, this is an inequitable or unfair practice of giving so much to this group or these groups of people. But then you have to look at the impact of, then you already have this shortage. So once you take that funding away, those students are no longer in service. Then you can't pay the teachers to do what they need to do. Then you really can't start to pay the administrators because you don't have anyone showing up in your building, or you're trying to make numbers, or you're trying to do the things that you need to do. And so the whole system suffers, right? Everybody feels the impact of things. And so the opportunities to fully inform, to come together, to understand the need, to fight against the removal of these things because we need it, right? Is important. And then the historical context. So I'm glad Dr. Bryant mentioned like those kind of learning communities, literary societies that used to exist. We also need to recognize that our special education department was initially created under false pretenses. It really didn't go to serve the students. It was like they're put them elsewhere, right? And over time, we've done the work to say that is not okay. They need to be in this space with us, and they need to be in community with us, and they need to be serviced.
Right.
And their learning just looks different. It's not
Right.
bad. It's just different from the way in which you learn, but it still requires room, space, and need. And so it's a fight, and it's really a fight of our intellect. It's an intellectual fight that we are in right now, because our thinking is either disturbed by the wrong things that we might be uninformed about, and how do we shift that? And so I think that is something too. Steps we need to take is just to look at the fact that this is an intellectual war as well.
Thank you so much. And go ahead, Dr. Bryant.
We were talking about teacher shortage and paying them more or whatever. It is about paying them more, but also, I mean, the data suggests that when people feel like they're doing meaningful work, that they are well respected, money is not as important. And I think that that's something we need to raise up a little bit more, because often we disrespect our teachers. You know?
That's right.
And it isn't always about money. You know, it's about respect to them, because really they're so important.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel for the children, because sometimes within society there's that carrot of the dollar, of the $1 million and the $1 billion that's put before children, as if, this is accessible now, and not really honing in on their purpose and their talents and their abilities, and just being the best person that you can be, and being an asset to the community. Not saying that I don't want you to be economically well off, but I want you to thrive, So I know our time is up, and so excited and happy that both of you could be here tonight, as we motivate, educate, and empower our communities in bridging the gap of education. So on the way out, let's say, if you have one thing, one message that you would like to provide for our listeners, please do so. If you can think of one thing you can say to encourage us to bridge the gap, and how they can do that.
Well, one of the things I thought of immediately after just listening to you again was, I remember once I was listening to the Dalai Lama speak, and he was talking about an education that teaches kindness, morality, wanting to help others. So I think if we create more community like that, and less emphasis on how much money you want to make, I think we'd be in a better space.
I like that. Thank you so much, Dr. Bryant. Chantelle?
I just want to raise up a quote by Desmond Tutu that says, "My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together." And that speaks to Dr. Bryan's need to really place kindness at the forefront, because we are all humans at the end of the day. We have a commonality, and that is it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, those are both. Oh my goodness, that is so impactful. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here this evening. This has been a wonderful evening. And again, Michigan Coalition for Human Rights is here within our community now for over 44 years. And we are excited about our next, this year, 2025, that we have all come together for this moment and that our purpose and the call to action is now. So feel free to become a part of our community, and you can go to mchr.org and check out our website. You can become a member. And we are if you would like to be a board member after becoming a member, let us know. We are here and we want to collaborate with those who are activists in their community, because it's about what you're doing too. It's about your purpose. And when we come together on issues, we are powerful together than we are separated. And we will not allow any division within our community. Thank you so much. God
Thank
bless you all. And I'll
you.
see you next time for
All
Candid
right.
Conversations with
Have a great
MCHR.
evening, everyone.
Night.
All right. But good night.